So triangulation, let's really dive into what that is. And it kind of sounds like what it's meant to sound. We have a triangle that forms. And when you think of a triangle, right, you have your three edges, and you're probably thinking of it right side up. So imagine it more towards an upside down pyramid, where the best balance is actually going to be the top. That's where we want our flat surface. And in that, you then have your child from both parents down at the bottom. And what happens with triangulation, an unbalanced triangle, the idea of it is it's going to tip over so that the two sides work against the other. And that's not what we want. We want the balance to sit there. And so it's always a balancing triangle with that upside down figure. And when the child or your teenager or any of your kids come running to one parent over the other and start navigating to that parent for more issues than the other, depending upon how you like to have the family balanced, it starts to form some unhealthy habits for the family. We want more of an equal footing, an equal balance for the family. So a good example on this one is your family goes to the store and you see an ice cream parlor in your next door. Dad wants to buy ice cream from the store and take it home. Mom wants to go into the ice cream parlor. And you then have a discussion in front of the children, and the kids get to chime in. And all the kids want that immediately. While the quality of the ice cream in the grocery store actually might be better, might not. But it then has the kids side with mom who wants to go into the store rather than the parents sorting it out separately, and therefore causes triangulation, the kids and the mom against the father. Or it could be vice versa. You head to a toy store for kids for Christmas shopping, and dad wants to get all the kids a toy for going, while mom's wanting the kids to pick out toys for each other that they're going to wait on. And of course, children want the instant gratification, so they side with dad against the mom. And there's where we get into a really good discussion, is that sometimes arguing in front of your children will always do more harm than good. And it's best to come as a unified front. So we don't want to give the opportunities for a triangulation to occur. A lot of discussion is separate from the family, with the parents coming back and having a healthy discussion with their kids up front. So how do we make that look? Well, we're going to make that look in a lot of ways. We're going to do a lot of different activities to get the parents to be having healthy communication so they can model for their children. And this is one of those challenges that's brought up, is because how do we even get to the point where we're not seeing the conflict we have as parents? Well, it's because, just like what I'm trying to teach you, you were taught by your parents. And you learn that both through a conscious and subconscious process. And it's a really fascinating pattern there, is that everything you were taught by your parents, by seeing them go about their daily lives, how they handled conflict with each other, how they handled interactions. And you witnessed it. And there's many times you'd be like, I don't want to be like my parents. Or, hey, my parents handle this really well, so I know how to handle this problem too. And then you got your partner, who was not raised by your parents, but their own. So then you have two different views coming together, trying to sort out all these moments of how do we raise our kids. And finding the best path for the two of you, having this communication separate from the visibility of your children, that is a great way to start differentiating yourself from your parents. Whether your parents there or not, you're having a view from both sides to raise your children the best way possible for how you two interact. So it's a really great balancing act. And there can be conflict in that. There can be challenges in that. But I would tell you the strongest method to start with that is by having those separate conversations with your partner where you come to the table and agreeing on things outside of the child's purview. And if you're already doing that, great. You're starting to balance your family home. We then get into a different challenge there, is saying, well, what if me and my partner still disagree despite us not arguing in front of our children? Well, there's where we get into some communication patterns that are really healthy to navigate and sort it out. And then also the topic of, well, what if I cannot for the life of me agree with my loved one, with my partner? There's just not any way we're going to see eye to eye on a topic. Fair enough. That may happen. What happens if I get heated with my partner? Well, the big one is that you first and foremost are doing your best to balance the family. What's going to be in the best interest of your children? What's going to be the best interest of you? And I do encourage, to some degree, for every family, a small amount of selfishness. Oftentimes we might get caught up in saying that we need to have the best decision. If I can't agree on the best decision, then nothing will work. That's not always true. It's rarely true, to be quite honest. Many times we are going to make a lot of mistakes in order to be able to help raise our children effectively, or really just cohabitate at times. So we don't always need the best decision, but we need a decision on a unified front. And that's where you come across conflict, is one partner may be being far more stubborn than the other. So if you're getting to a point where you're yelling, ready to curse at each other, really being frustrated, screaming, that's time to take a break and time to cool off. So when we work on our triangulation, is that we want to make sure that we can stay ourselves calm and reflected. So a few strategies in talking with your partner when it comes to working on the triangulation of the home is first identifying what really is coming between you and your partner. So when I talk about triangulation a lot, we often see it mostly as the concept of the children getting between the parents, like I previously discussed. And that's when it starts to cause the parents to disagree and then be feeling like they're getting ganged up against or having been sided against. But then let's talk then that doesn't need to be just children. And no, it can be quite a lot of things. What if the excuse of extra work pops up, or that you feel very strongly about going to the gym Monday through Sunday and your partner disagrees with that and feels it's getting in the way? What if electronics are getting in the way? What if having that phone puts a wall up between the two of you and you're saying, well, man, I really need my downtime to relax. Your partner's saying, well, you're always on that thing. That can be pretty frustrating. So identifying what really is coming between the two of you, and I emphasize that a lot, is in order to have a triangle, you need to have at least two people and then a third point. So what's getting between the two of you, rather than having it be balanced where you're on the same side with your partner? That's something to highlight. So when you get overly frustrated and you feel like the conversation's really going nowhere, I encourage taking a 10-minute break. Take a 10-minute pause, but also highlight where that pause needs to be coming from. You've gotten heated, you've gotten frustrated, you're starting to yell at your partner. You're behaving in a way that you don't want to behave. You take that pause, you take those 10 minutes, you work on some breathing. I really do highly recommend the 3s breathing technique, which is breathe in through your nose for 3 seconds, hold your breath for 3 seconds, and breathe out for 3 seconds. And I bet you can guess that you do it 3 times. And that starts to help regulate some breathing, but then you go through and soothe yourself with 5 senses, 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can touch, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. That last one for taste can be a little hard, so I usually like just focusing on the tongue and reframing and saying, I want to have a good conversation with my partner. I want to solve this, and I'm ready to go back in after 10 minutes. That's a good way to calm yourself down. If it's getting really heated and you're getting really angry and you're ready to throw things, or maybe you have thrown things, I'm actually going to recommend the ice technique for you. This comes from a good set of anger management, is that you go to your fridge, you grab some of the cold, freezing ice, hold that in your hand, you walk outside in the front with it, or the back, wherever you have some good concrete that the ice won't damage. And you're going to hold that ice and feel that little bit of burn, and everything you're frustrated in, you smash that ice on the ground and watch it shatter. And if you're in California like me, it's kind of nice because then the ice begins to melt rather quickly. And as that ice begins to melt, you need to let your anger melt with the ice. And use this reflection tool saying, okay, I've gotten the physical frustration out. I know I'm frustrated, and now I'm gonna go revisit my partner. And since it is ice more often than not, when it melts, there's not really any cleanup, so that's kind of nice. So there's where calming down in a frustrating argument, to not let that argument, that anger, that frustration, the behavior that you don't want, also get in the way of your communication. So then we're going to talk a little bit about how you can communicate with your partner to start agreeing on it and rebalance the family. And with that, I actually have several techniques. I do like the Dear Man technique. I do like the reflective listening technique. But oftentimes I really like being direct. So go in there and saying, partner, here's what I really feel frustrated about. I feel this is occurring, and I want this to change. Balance with me, how do we overcome that obstacle? It's probably one of the strongest techniques you can work with your partner on, and down the line, model for your kids. So here's a hot take for you on a little bit of this triangulation as well. Why is conflict and arguing in front of your kids more damaging than divorce? Well, that's because I go back to that triangulation, and usually unresolved childhood emotional conflict can be far more damaging than parents separating. There's usually a lot more of that arguing, yelling, screaming, and fighting in front of the kids that happens during a divorce than the divorce itself, that leads the children to really side with one parent over the other and not become differentiated for themselves growing up, but instead very much enmeshed with only one parent's ideals, and therefore closed off to conversation, closed off to future conflict, and siding with just one person and saying that's the only way to go, rather than having opportunities to resolve conflict, work through emotion, and work through connection. So that's one of the biggest things we advocate here for Sunset Coast Family Therapy, is that we need that connection. We need to connect with others. We need to connect with family and have balanced, healthy lives of our own differentiation of self to be the best people we want to be, so that we fight and challenge conflict. And you'll hear me say in a lot of videos, healing begins with connection. Well, that's a big part of it. We need to connect to others in order to be able to live in the world that we live in. And that's the downside to many of the things that we see in our world today, is a lot of people are withdrawing, and we have constant availability to withdraw. So let's work on that connection. Let's get that opportunity out there. It starts first in the home. Get your connection solved in the home, and your children will have so much of an easier time out and about in the world, more so than others. And that's what's going to help develop some future leaders, strong individuals, and decrease the concerns for mental health for your family. Another hot take for you on this one is that sometimes being a good parent is not being the best parent. And there's a fun conversation to have, is that your children do need to learn quite a lot. And then sometimes we have the challenges of ourselves of being overly anxious that's inherited into our children because our anxiety bleeds into them. And that's what we call enmeshment. Being far too infused in a mesh with one single parent over a balanced, healthy home. And we do have a lot of single parents out there, so it's not so much focused on that, but is then how do we ensure that our children's getting a diversified view to handle conflict and to differentiate themselves from the patterns that we may be passing on. So one of the biggest challenges I see is being that rescue parent. My child has a problem, so I'm gonna go save him from it. I'm gonna fix this quick. There's times where we as parents absolutely need to intervene. And one of the topics I bring up is that sometimes it is okay to yell at your children. And a lot of families go, whoa, wait a minute, what do you mean? Well, let's talk about that for a minute. Should we be yelling at our children for the sake of yelling at our children? Absolutely not. But if it's ever a concern of safety, when your child's running into the street where there's cars, I can say that's probably a pretty justified time to be able to rescue your child. So what do I mean then when I talk about rescue parenting in particular? Well, your children's on the playground and they're having an issue with a ball being thrown and they're picking up the ball and not sharing. Or another child has taken their toy and you're coming over to take that toy back for them. Children need to sort that out themselves. They need to handle that conflict. They need to handle that resolution. Not everybody out there is going to always be nice to your child, so rescuing them where they don't get to learn how to interact with others is a big and unique challenge. So what I actually really like to do with my families and with the kids is do two activities. I actually do really love a strategy that we came up with in-house called the 10-minute talk. And with the 10-minute talk is something I recommend doing about 3 times a week, especially with teenagers. I actually say this is a better one for teenagers, but you can start it with the younger ones and modify it for your needs. Get a timer. Set on a timer for 5 minutes. And when the child comes home, you're going to sit there, be completely mindful, although all of their phones and tools are away, and say, hey, I'd like you to fill up this 5 minutes with everything you've done through the day. Let's reflect on everything that happened. Conflict, challenge, excitement, joy, frustrations, you name it. Engage in that 10-minute talk. But the first 5 minutes, it's protected for them. You don't get to interrupt them. You don't insert anything for it. It's 5 minutes going by of just them filling up that time. And let them have that protected time. Non-judge, non-question, just full conversation. And then when the 5 minutes goes off, you get a 2-minute rebuttal. Start that timer again for 2 minutes. You get to ask all the questions. You're interrupted. You get to make your comments. And it's a good reflection tool. And at the end of those 2 minutes, we still got 3 minutes left. It's a 10-minute talk. You reset that timer for 3 minutes, and there's where it becomes a good back and forth. Repeating questions, rephrasing, getting clarification. That's the last 3 minutes. Takes up a whopping, usually with the timer reset and pauses, 12 minutes total for 10 minutes of conversation. So try that out with your family. Have that wonderful conversation. See how it goes. Sunset coast, we're